Hey there, I'm Neil. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm the host of my new podcast, Pause and Rewind. I'll be chatting to changemakers, thought leaders, and role models who all share a common goal. They're striving to make the world a more inclusive place. And let's face it, we need it. Each guest has a unique story when it comes to doing their thing, and we often know who people are in the now. But how much do we really know about them? Pause and Rewind takes a moment to explore the experiences in my guest's life that led them to where and who they are now. Because everyone loves an origin story. We'll dive into tales, anecdotes, and what makes our guests tick. So, are you ready to pause and rewind? Hey there, and welcome to this episode of Pause and Rewind, where I am chatting to the gorgeous Saski. I love Saski. I knew about Saski way before we got to know each other. And I was in Pride in London in the parade, and Saski was on kind of like a lift in the middle of the crowd, and was on the mic, talking to all the different floats and people passing by. And as someone that wanted to kind of like tackle my fear of public speaking, I remember looking at Saskia and thinking, I want to be able to do that. I want to do what she's doing because I was so amazed by her. And then I saw her on stage at Essex Pride and still just like found her so inspiring. So when we kind of got to know each other and became aware of each other, it was just this really serendipitous moment because I had been tackling my fear of public speaking and in the back of my mind thinking, yes, this is what I want to be. So I share that with Saski because yeah, she was really fundamental in me pursuing my fear of public speaking and hosting events and such. Saski is a DEI trainer focusing on LGBTQI plus inclusion and allyship. She's a community speaker for the Met Police in terms of working with them to help them understand and support our community better. She's an ambassador for many charities. She is a trainer. She's currently working on some exciting things which she shares. She's also a presenter, does really fun pride presenting, and she's also a singer, life coach, and a mum. So I'm really excited for you to get to know all about Saski. I just want to put a trigger warning out there. We do cover the topic of bulimia, so I would just like to encourage you to take care of yourself whilst listening. I love this conversation. We've been trying to get it in for a while. Here it is. Enjoy. Cheers. Hey Saski, welcome to Pause and Rewind. I'm so glad to finally have you as a guest.
Oh, thank you, Neil. You know what? I know we've talked about this for ages, so I'm really excited to be here as well. So thanks for having me.
Well, I love, love, love seeing you out and about at events. We always have the best chats. And I'd like to start by asking the question before we dive into your origin story, what does the world look like for Saski right now?
Well, the world looks, I think, quite exciting in many ways. I've got lots of things kind of always on the bubble, if you like lots of different projects and things that I'm kind of doing. One of the main things that I'm working on at the moment is I've written and kind of deliver already my everyday pride training, which is basically LGBTQ plus inclusion training and allyship. So I already deliver that, but I've recently in the last kind of 3 to 6 months changed it up and I'm making it into an online course. However, that might sound a little bit boring, but the exciting part for me about it is that I'm actually working with a company in Australia who are helping me to promote it, and we're going to kind of be able to put it out kind of globally. So I've got the licensing, I've got the videos, and also I'm trying to kind of I didn't want it to be like a boring generic kind of online course.
Yeah.
So I've made it a bit more kind of masterclass style, like with the videos where you kind of chat into the camera and it's a bit like that. So I'm hoping that that little twist on it is going to make it a bit more, exciting for people to watch. So yeah, that's what I'm doing with my kind of course. And then I guess in terms of my more creative side, which I'm looking to lean into more, just going to really be starting. I'm pushing more on my presenting and hosting, and plans to do a little podcast as well, which I'm sure
Exciting.
you'll be a guest on very soon.
100%.
Yeah, of course. And yeah, just really going to start honing in on my creative side, really. And because I feel like I'm at a bit of a turning point in my world, and I feel like I really want to take this year to kind of focus on that more creative side of what I do.
I love that. Like the turning point. My word for the year this year was bounce. And so it was about kind of like scoping out like different opportunities and stuff, and seeing where I land. But actually, I've kind of hit that point of view. Just, I'm turning 42 next month, and I'm just kind of in that like mindset of, right, where am I going? What am I going to
Mm.
do? What do I want to become known for? What's my legacy going to be? All that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm so excited by this course. And actually, I love the way that you merge your creative side, and the inclusion side of things with your presenting. I just want to take a minute. Just, I know I've told you this before, but for those listening, the first time I saw Saski on stage was way before we knew each other. And Saski, you were on this kind of platform at Pride in London, and I was in the float with London South Bank University, who I used to work for. And this was very much at a time when my public speaking was a dream, right? To be able and I remember looking at you hosting and thinking, I want to be able to do that. Like you were,
Aw.
and then I met you, and I instantly remembered where I knew you from. Like it was like I met you, we had a chat, and then I was like, I know where I know her from. And then I was just like, it was just this whole kind of like whirlwind, because by that point I'd started on my sober journey, started to overcome my fear of public speaking. But in my mind, whenever I think about my journey for public speaking, you are up there as someone that I want to be like.
Oh, Neil, you give me like goosebumps and butterflies, honestly. Oh, that's really nice to hear. Thank you so much. I think, I guess, particularly with like public speaking and things like that. I mean, I always really enjoy it and love it, but there's always that slight element of imposter syndrome. I think that's like that across the board people might have. So to hear that kind of story from someone, from the outside looking in, that's really nice to hear. So thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. And not just like the kind of like, the public speaking, the fun, the energy you bring to it. It was so much fun. And since then I've seen you do Essex Pride as well. Again,
Amazing.
that was kind of before we knew each other properly as well. And just love what you do. And I remember last year, no, earlier this year, I got to do one of the stages at the London Marathon, the LGBTQ stage at the London
Oh,
Marathon.
amazing.
And the LGBTQ stage, but it was kind of like it was the late shift in the day. It was when the last runners were coming through. So it wasn't as busy as it is earlier in the day. But I still remember thinking, yeah, kind of like this is kind of what I had envisioned when I saw you doing it all those
Oh.
years previously. So yeah, thank you for just inspiring me without even knowing it.
Oh, mate. Well, listen, thanks for sharing that because you're probably going to give me a big head now. I'll see. I mean, I'll go
It's
into
it,
Neil mode.
it's deserved. The course sounds brilliant. You do so much other stuff as well, like working with the Met. You're an ambassador for Includability, Pride Life magazine, and JAAQ as well, mental
Mm,
health platform. How do you balance it all? Because when we wear many different hats, like we do, like many of us queer people do, the people in this podcast is all about focusing on people who are striving to make the world a more inclusive place. I'm always
mm.
keen to know how you balance it all and how you take care of yourself. Not very
Well,
well.
not very well. Yeah, I think exactly that. Yeah, I think
Damn, I was hoping for an answer.
you know what? Again, like I think it's one of these things, and also I think this plays into kind of that whole when you're working for yourself as well. You kind of like I really love doing lots of different things. And I don't think my brain works in the way that I could just sit and do one thing because my focus isn't there. I mean, I don't know. We've talked about ADHD before. I don't know if
We
there are
have.
strands of that. I've been told a few times that I may or be, and if I am, whatever, that's fine. But for me, I just feel a bit like I know I get so excited about lots of different things and passionate about them. And I kind of always have the feeling of why can't I do all of this? And part of it, like we were talking earlier, I was saying, to an extent, it can be a bit detrimental because maybe some ways you might feel like you're watering yourself down a bit.
Mm.
But then the other side of it is, but I don't want to not do it. So I kind of I don't know if I necessarily manage it. I just do it.
Yep.
And then I think in the self-care thing, I probably should be better at it because sometimes I can get into a bit of burnout. And I feel like actually in the last few months, particularly following off the back of Pride season, I did feel like I went into burnout again. And I felt a bit like, oh no, really got to kind of get better at sorting that, looking after yourself a bit more. Because when I'm good, I can be very healthy. I'm going down the gym, I'm doing, all the right things. But when I'm not, when I'm just in that like completely my brain's frazzled mind, to be honest, it's not that I go drinking those, but I will very happily I just want to shy away. I don't want to speak to people. I'll be
Mm.
happy on the sofa watching, rubbish junk TV with a few beers, because that's all I can kind of deal with at that
Yeah.
point.
That's self-care in itself though, isn't it, really?
It's self-care, yeah, but then I guess I've put on myself more pressure, because I'm like, why are you doing this? Why are you sitting
Mm.
doing nothing? Where I should be thinking, actually, the reason you're here right now is because you've actually done about 10 things in a day. And
Yeah.
sometimes I think, God, if people sat and like, sometimes I'd be like doing a training session in the morning, then I might be doing an interview in the afternoon, and then it might be that I've got to go and do a gig in the evening, and literally it can be as crossover as that, and that can be quite a regular thing. Like my weeks are never exactly the same day to
Yeah.
day. There's always changes, and again, I love these things, but it's a lot, so I need to take stock and remind myself sometimes that actually, give myself maybe a bit more credit
A
for that.
credit and a break, because like I'm the
And a
same as you.
break,
I feel
yeah.
like I should constantly be doing stuff, and I do beat myself up. If I have a day doing
Mm,
nothing, I'm like,
yeah,
what are you doing? You've got so much to do. But actually, I think, and particularly with what we're facing in society with anti-LGBTQ rhetoric as well, that
yeah.
rest is
Mm.
firstly, it's an act of resistance in itself, but we can't deal with the big stuff unless we feel rested, unless we feel able to.
Yeah, you know what, and it's really important that you've kind of raised that, because particularly in our field where we are kind of, essentially we are LGBTQIA plus activists, aren't we, like, and we're doing that in the strands of work. And I think for me personally, I battled with the whole thing of, I found it very stressful at times because of that kind of the rhetoric, and because of the kind of the negativity that is currently surrounding our community, which very much so, I think this is, well, go back to the 80s, obviously, with the kind of Section 28 and the HIV and AIDS epidemic. There was a big media storm about how bad the community was. But fast forward to where we are now, it feels very much like a similar thing. And obviously, this in my lifetime is where I would be living it. But when you're even supporting people, particularly for the trans community, I was feeling a bit guilty that because I got to the point where I feel like I've got nothing left in me at this point, like
Mm.
in terms of, I'm constantly training on it, constantly talking about it, and I felt guilty, because I was thinking, how can you say and feel that you want to have a little rest or time out from it, when actually the poor people like the trans community who are experiencing it day to day, face to face, are still having to deal with it. Like, you don't get that chance to take the break because they don't. But then I thought, well, you can't have control of everything. And
No.
actually, like you just said there before, like I do, if I didn't take that step back, like even off social media and things like that, if I hadn't taken that step back, I can't refill and regen, as my son would say. I can't like re-energize to come back and be the support or the advocate that I am very good at being.
Yeah.
So you do need to. I need to take that on board as well.
That's it. And I think that that showing up is self-care is also showing up because it's showing up for yourself, but also
Mm.
like tapping into the more joyful side of things. Because our work, there does tend to be a focus on the challenges and the struggles and the issues and the
Yeah.
stats and all that. But actually, there's so much joy in our community.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, definitely, it's absolutely not doom and gloom. And I think part of why I kind of do a lot of different types of things within my role, like I'm very much about how we can positively shine that
Yeah,
light on our community.
yeah,
And even if I am delivering training, when I'm doing that, whether it's trans inclusion or allyship or LGBT plus as a whole, I kind of, part of my how I do that is actually a lot through humor,
yeah,
and I don't mean let's all laugh at the quiz. I just mean, like, actually we do need to I need to be able to bring those people on board
yeah,
with me, because how if I go in like all guns blazing, like, this is what's happening to our community and you need to do better, and I know for well that's not going to work. So my
yeah,
approach is to kind of level it out with the seriousness of what's happening, with a bit of humor where it's appropriate, and then actually that helps people to really come on board and have that buy-in of the realization of, actually, what, yeah, shit, I can do stuff to make a change, actually,
yeah.
even if it's a little thing. So
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah, kind
I
of.
can see how you bring so much joy and energy. Like I love watching your Pride presenting over Pride season. It's been amazing to see. Tapping into joy before we dive into your origin story. being a mum, I mean, I've spoke to you about mum life before. I know that brings you so much joy.
Mm. Oh God, it does. I mean, I'm a non-biological mum. Not that that necessarily means anything, but I guess for anyone watching, listening, you know, you can be a parent no matter who you are. If you're a loving parent, it doesn't matter. And I think to bring my son into the world, we went through such a journey. Like initially was through IVF, and that was stressful and expensive and crazy in itself, and it took a long time. And then obviously, just I'm yeah, I just he's 14 now, my son, and that journey in itself, which is probably another podcast session, was that we did go through IVF and everything to bring him into the world, and then we had him, then we were parents, and then we split up as a couple, and that's fine because it just wasn't working, and it was the best thing for us. But then unfortunately we did go through like this massive big court. There was like 3 rounds of court, and it was just for me simply to kind of stay in his life and having to justify why I went from being like, literally being told, oh, world's greatest mum type thing, to having to justify being a parent and being demonized and all rubbish made up about me. So as much as I love my son just because I'm a mum, I
Mm.
think personally, and there is a little bit of trauma in that, when I had to deal with that I'm so much more, even more so protective, and I'm so much more about our time together and how precious it is. And, so I'm really grateful in many ways, because sometimes when you go through things like that, it makes you realize the importance of what you've got, even more so, But
Yeah.
yeah, he's my world, basically. I love him.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I can feel that. And you've told me stories before about you're raising him to be such a wicked LGBTQ ally as well, an all-round amazing human.
Well, you know what? I try, but it's funny because I don't want to shove things down his throat. I don't need to be honest. Like he's got lots of kind of queer friends. He's very kind of open and stuff, but he's still a teenager at the same time. And quite often he'll be like, "Oh God, Mum, like, do you have to keep going on?" Like, but I'm just saying, if any of your friends, if they feel like they ever want to chat or talk, I'm always here. And some of his little kind of queer mates, often, like if I hear him on the games, like when they're playing online and stuff, I have heard him saying before, "Oh yeah, my mum," like around Pride season, "Oh yeah, my mum's like hosting Pride, and my mum's marching in Pride," and I'm like, when I won't, I'll go in and I'll be like, "Oh, who are you chatting to?" And he'll say the person. I'll be like, "Oh, I think, oh yeah, I remember my son telling me that they were like non-binary, or they were, bisexual, or whoever it was." So I remember, I think like, oh, that's nice that he kind of
So
says,
cute. Little bit of
yeah,
pride.
he does, yeah. And even when he was little, just quickly, I always tried to get him up as a little, like a mascot. Like if I did like hosting Pride events, if I had him, I'd always get him up on stage as a little Pride mascot to come and say Happy Pride to everyone. But then
Oh,
now he's got to that age where he's totally not doing it. And
yeah.
in fact, the last time I got him to do it, he was probably about 12. And literally he was like, "I'll do it for a tenner." I was like, "Oh my God, like that's a
He's got
rip
the
off."
smarts.
Yeah, that's it. But yeah, no, I'm proud of him. Proud of him very much.
Saski, I'm so excited to dive into your origin story. Are you ready to pause and rewind?
I am ready, Neil. Let's do this.
Woohoo! Here we go. Take me back. Tell me all about Little Saski.
It's so funny. So, I mean, Little Saski. So, a bit of a disclosure here for those who probably may or may not know. So, my actual name is Joe. So, Saski is like kind of my professional name, my stage name. So, whether we're going Baby Saski, Baby Joe, as a kid, I think I was, I'm East London, proud East London. I was brought up in pubs. So, I kind of, was around lots of people from a very young age. Um, and I can kind of remember, like, I was thinking about this last night actually, early memories of, going round to people in the pub, or like the customers, because I was little, I was quite a cute little kid, and I was quite often, I would go around to them and I'd be like, I kind of learnt quite quickly that because I'd have little chats with them, they would give me money or they'd give me sweets.
Right?
And actually, out of my brother and sister, they didn't. I don't know why, but they didn't do that, and I did. And I used to go around and like, just chat to them. And then I can remember literally one day on my birthday going round to customers in the pub and just walking up to them going, "It's my birthday today," and then like holding my hand out, like waiting for some money.
And you wonder where your son gets it from, right?
Yeah, yeah, this is it. This is it. But yeah, I was always quite a bit of a tomboy really. I loved football. I was always running around with a bloody He-Man sword down my back, and like climbing trees, climbing and skateboarding. So yeah, I was quite a tomboy really, and I was quite, in hindsight, I was quite a sociable kid. I always had like friends and things like that, but I always, like, if I think about it, I was always that kid who just played with everybody. Like I never
Mm.
really had little cliques, or I'd be quite happy playing with the cool kids and also playing with what may have been perceived as like not so cool kids. As for me, it's just like who's hanging out, what we doing.
Love that. What are some of you maybe one of your favorite anecdotes that you've heard about yourself from someone?
As a kid, I think my there's a story about, again, probably going back to the whole money thing, like handing out the money and stuff. And I used to love the idea of the fact that I had money in my pocket. And I had this pair of red jeans. My mum talks about this story. When I was little, I had this, I must have been literally about 6, something like that. Had these red jeans that I wore day in, day out. Like I just loved them. And I loved having all the change in my pockets. Because for me, it just felt like I was like loaded, you know what I mean? I was
A
like, and it was
baller.
probably literally about 5 or something like that, but it was all change, like loose change in my pocket. So I just felt like loaded. And I think my mum got to the point where because I would insist on wearing these jeans. If I didn't wear them, I would cry. I'd get upset about it. But my mum got so sick of these jeans to the point where she put them in the bin. And I can remember being absolutely distraught and so angry about it. And she said, like, I literally running to the bin, like went in the bin, pulled my jeans out this dirty old bin, and I put them on again. And I was like, just like, oh, I'm wearing them. Do you know what I mean? So even like from that young age, just being quite defiant about what I wanted to do. So yeah, so I think, yeah, I always loved, I mean, apart from my red jeans, which I did love, but I just loved like going out having fun really. But
Yeah.
and playing, but where we lived in a pub, we had to kind of grow up quite quickly because I can remember, like, I had to work behind our bar. I mean, it was the 80s and early 90s, so really, like, we won't get away with that these days. But it was a family-run pub. My parents were working there to run errands and stuff. So I can literally remember being really into football, still having that, being in that age of, wanting to play football, climb trees, and just be a kid. And then running out, I can remember running out in the pub, about to go out with my friends, and my dad stopping me, saying, "Don't forget, you've got to be back at 5 o'clock for your shift." Do you know? And I must have literally, I'm not joking, I would have been about kind of like maybe 12. And that some people might be listening going, oh my God, but it was just a family run. It was like you pick
Yeah.
up what you've got to do, and we had to help out because otherwise my parents couldn't run errands and do what they needed to do. My mum had 2 jobs, and my dad was running this pub, and just how it was.
Yeah.
So you know
Happy memories though, it sounds like.
yeah, I was very lucky. My family've always been quite close, and extended family, like aunties, cousins and stuff. We've always been quite a close family. And I think that's been very important to me, obviously growing up and shaping me as to who I am.
How much of Little
So
Saski do you see now?
well, I think there's always kind of that fun side that I like, and I'm very, even though sometimes we can have ups and downs in life. That's just reality, isn't it? And I always try to see that kind of humor, and I always try to, and I'm very big on my family, even though, like, sometimes you can just kill them because family just like get on your nerves sometimes, don't they? But overall, I'm very protective of my family, and I've always kind of, even as a kid, like if there was ever any bullies or anyone that said anything to my little brother or even my bigger sister, I would be the one being like ready, standing to kind of want to fight them and stuff. And I'm very protective of my family even now. Do you know what I mean? Even I'm allowed to kill them, but no one else is.
So what was school like for you? Sounds like you were sociable, adventurous, a little bit defiant. Did that come through in school life?
Yeah, but I think primary school, juniors, again, like I was very sociable, and I enjoyed school. It was never that I didn't enjoy school. Even in secondary school, it was never the case I didn't enjoy it. I wasn't particularly academic, but I guess I got through it because of the social side. Like, and again, I think, like, I don't know, let's say secondary school. I went to like an all girls Catholic school that was run by nuns, so it was quite strict.
Okay.
It was quite strict, and it was, I guess it was for me, like I would be smoking like around the back behind the vans with my friends, but I wasn't necessarily in the cool gang. Again, like I was just someone who knew everyone, and I think
Yeah,
that's how I am now. I know a lot of people, and people tend to know me, but I'm just that's that sociable side of it, you know.
yeah.
But I mean, don't get me wrong. If I thought I could get away with like having a day off school, pretending I was sick, or you know, my sister wasn't the best influence on me at times, and I would be bunking off where I could as well. You know, but school in general, it was all right. We'll talk probably more about like, little changes and pivotal times in those early years, won't we? So
Well, definitely. I mean,
yeah.
my next question is kind of like, around your teenage years, obviously kind of changes in our bodies, our first heartbreak, we
Mm,
discover more of our sense of self. For some of us as queer people, it's a coming out time. For some of us, it's actually the worst time,
mm.
for many of us, it's difficult. What did that look like for you?
It was interesting, you know, because I think again, probably from around maybe age 12, 13, and 14, they were quite big pivotal changes in my teenage years, as they are for many people. But I think, like, you know, as I kind of just touched on before, I went from kind of being that little tomboy running out wanting to play football and just have fun and being a kid to then maybe reaching kind of 13 and being in the all girls, you know, convent school, and and being a bit like I developed like bulimia when I was like early, like age 13, out of nowhere really. And it was, I mean, looking back, I kind of have, I can understand a bit how it happened, but
Mm,
anyway, it was like a something that happened, and but I remember feeling like I had a handle on it. But then once my parents found out, because the school found out, and then once my parents found out, I just remember, even though they were supportive, I felt so ashamed of
mm,
that's what was doing, and that's what I brought onto my family. And my parents were really supportive, but I really could see the stress it had brought them, you know, because I'm their little girl. Do you know what I mean? They don't
yeah.
want me going through that. But then, interesting enough, a bit maybe later in that same year, I also had this mad out of nowhere realization that I had a massive crush on my drama teacher, and she was a female, and I was just remember thinking like, oh my god, like where has this come from? It was almost like this major realization, and yeah, being really excited about it, but also being really scared and knowing that actually I can't tell anybody about it. Do you know what I mean? But I was totally in love with her, totally in love with her.
That's
Yeah,
not the first teacher crush that's come up on
no,
the podcast.
no,
Unsurprisingly, I think it's quite common.
yeah,
If you don't mind going back to the bulimia side
mm,
of things, if you're happy to open up a little bit more, what was your thoughts around the world at that time? Like, do you remember what thinking kind of like, why is this happening? And, how did you get through it? Is it something that is still a process? Was it?
yeah. I think fortunately, no, it's definitely it is in the way in the past. It's that, and you know, the thought of being sick and anything like that now, it makes me feel sick. I can't bear it. You know, like if you have food poisoning or anything like that, I'm like, oh
Yeah.
god, I really don't want to be sick. Like, so thankfully, it's really not an issue. I think at the time, I think I don't necessarily believe it was related to maybe a subconscious like about my sexuality or anything like that. I don't think that. I actually think it was more related to just weight, and I think, you know, feeling like how there is a lot of pressure for young kids, young girls, but kids in general. I think often, and even back then in like the early 90s, you know, um, it would have kind of played into me about, you know, being slim and being felt like I should, even though I was still quite sporty, but I think it was off the back of that. And do you know what, I can actually this I can remember how it started, because my dad said to me, he literally, I can remember him coming through, he was in the pub, I was in the kitchen, he'd come through and he said to me, right, there's a show on, there's something I want you to watch on the TV, so to make sure you don't do this. And in him, bless him, he was literally trying to protect me to bulimia. He must have seen it on the TV in the pub and rushed through to the kitchen. He said, watch this. And it was a show about kids being bulimic, and it was a show about them, you know, saying how they've got through it and just warning people about it. And, you know, it was
Mm,
one of them kind of educational programs. And I remember watching it thinking, ah, I could do that. I could do that. I could
right.
eat loads of food because I really love food. But then I could just throw it up, and then I'll be, and I could do that. And obviously I didn't realize what goes with that. Like, then it has this, psychological impact on you as well as your health impact. But, how very quickly I kind of, it was almost like I made myself bulimic because I
Right.
watched this, but then it was also because I did have to worry about weight. I can remember being like 7 and 8, or standing on the scales, thinking like, oh gosh, I'm too heavy. And so it does play into you. And I think when I saw that, that was really where it started. And then I had that whole thing of like becoming obsessed with like exercise, but then ordering a pizza, like
Mm.
scoffing it, and then be throwing up and then feeling guilty. So very quickly I got into that real horrible cycle of bulimia, basically.
I mean, I guess when you might not necessarily have the maturity to understand what the essence of the show was around, and then
Yeah.
you kind of get it a bit mixed up in your mind without having
Mm.
that experience. That's, could be part of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel, I don't. Uh, my dad, obviously, it's nothing to do with him. He literally
No.
was supporting me. And if that show was on again, or just similar as I do with my son now, you want to warn your kids and try and support them, don't you?
I guess the
Yeah,
conversation alongside it, and I get back in the 90s, a lot of those conversations were missing, right?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Nothing like what we have now. So yeah, it wasn't really, people didn't talk about things like
Yeah.
that. And obviously, bulimia is a very secretive kind of illness when people have that,
Mm.
because there is a lot of shame around it. And you don't want people to kind of know. And unfortunately with it, you feel and believe you are in control of it,
Yeah.
but you're not, in many ways.
Um, has that being able to have those conversations now with your son, is that do you think that's part of a result of not being able to have them in the 90s?
Um, yeah, I just feel like I just want to. I mean, I do work a lot with young people as well, so I'm very
Mm.
much about empowering them to try and feel like they've got their voice to talk about any issues. Particularly, like you say, yeah, now there are so many additional pressures. Forget I'm
Yeah.
just growing up as a kid. You've got social media. You've got, like it's hard. I do think it's harder for kids,
It
and I think
is.
we really do need to be mindful about allowing them of some space to talk, and not just for our queer community, for queer youth, for kids in general. And I
Yeah.
think, yeah, with my son, I'm often telling him about, beware of cyberspace, beware if you get put in a group chat and then someone sends you this picture, do not respond, delete it, you tell me about it, la la la. And like all of these things. And I think, part of me is probably over parenting to an extent of just wanting him to, you just want to protect him on every level. But then the other part of it is, well, I do want him to feel comfortable to talk about anything, and even if for me, I know that there might be times where he might say things that that might be hurtful, or they might be stuff I don't want to hear. But I tell him, don't ever worry about what you want to talk to me about, even if you think you're going to get in trouble or I'm going to go mad. I said, doesn't matter, because I won't, but I just want you to know you can talk. Because, I worry about mental health for kids, and I worry
Yeah.
about, people and suicide and things like that. Because we do, there's stories that I hear in the field that I work in, it's not too uncommon, unfortunately. So I want him to have that knowing, which I think he does. But sometimes when he says to me, God, Mum, I know you don't have to keep going on, I'll say, but listen, the reason I'm telling you, it might not be you. I want you to share that with your mates, because if
Yeah.
your mates ever feel like they can't talk to their parents or they can't say anything, I said, I want you to feel comfortable and confident to go, maybe my mum can help, or, and I hope they don't ever need to do that. I hope they're never in that position, but we all need someone. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, sometimes you don't have that person.
Yeah, and just going back to what we were talking, I don't feel that, I know we're quite similar ages. I don't feel that we had it. I mean,
Mm.
so to hear that parents these days are creating those open, safe spaces where they feel support and they can lean on people, because I definitely didn't feel like I had that.
Yeah, we didn't. It was I think the 90s, when we think about the 90s, in the early 2000s to where we're at now, and particularly in line with the digital age and
Yeah.
social media, there is a lot more open platform for people to raise raise awareness on so many different things. So we kind of get bombarded with so much information, whether we want it or not. But there is, like, even if it's like little droplets of like information, we're aware of so many different issues.
Yeah.
And in some ways that's really great and it's important, but in other ways it can be either overwhelming or it can trigger things for people. And it's it's a lot more to deal with, I think, these days, even as adults. But I think it's important it's out there, because, you know, we you can't be silent, you know, and that's what I
Not
think
at all,
I
not
want
at
people
all.
to
And
know.
no. And with the younger generations coming through, they are really switched on because there's that
Mm,
openness and there's the information out there. Let's take
yeah.
it back to teenage Saskia. Um, what does the world look like on the horizon? Like, what did you want to do and what happens next?
Well, I kind of like, you know, when I left school, well, I say, well, not when, before, like, okay, rewind a bit, let's go back. In school, you know, I just kind of floated through school. I wasn't really
Mm.
very academic. But I didn't hate school. I just got through it. As I say, I think in my world, I was totally so in love with my drama teacher, as I mentioned. That was all that mattered to me. Like, that was my excitement. Like, literally, just quickly, I used to come home from the pub, lie on the sofa in the pub, and play on repeat Lionel Richie, Hello, Is It Me You're Looking For? Because I was just so in love with her. And if I think about it, the bar staff must have thought, what the hell is this kid doing every day? She's coming out, because I was in my little dream world. So a big part of my life in school was very much about just being in
That's
love with
so
this.
dramatic.
And like, yeah, like I could have changed love songs, surely. Anyway, that's what I did. But I think, yeah, I just kind of 14, age 14 also, I kind of switched in terms of my relationship with my siblings. Like, again, I used to hang out with my little brother a lot and be that very much that tomboy and playing in the
Mm.
park and football and that. And then when I got to like 13, 14, I suppose I changed dynamics with my relationship with my sister, my older sister, who, you know, I had a very good relationship with my sister for a long time. Well, we still do now, but, you know, growing up, she was quite a role model for me. Not necessarily always a good role model. Like, she was the one, she was like 4 years older. So she was kind of like, what, you know, 16, 17, 18. She was discovering alcohol. She was discovering boys. She was the one who I bunked off school with her friends. And, you know, so she kind of, and also I was bunking into kind of nightclubs and stuff because I was tall. And I can remember being in the queue and she'd be like, right, what's my date of birth? What's my date of birth? So I had to trying to remember like an 18-year-old's date of birth, so that in case I got asked. So yeah, I mean, I think it taught me a lot, again, from that social skills perspective. Um, and yeah, like I enjoyed. I always feel like if I think about my son now, he's 14, and I think what I was doing when I was 14, I was in clubs, drinking, smoking with boys, and just, you know, even though I knew I had my crush on my teacher, I still hadn't kind of like explored my sexuality anymore, because I couldn't tell
Mm.
anybody. You know, I was like, I absolutely could not come out, and I knew that. So I kind of had to emotionally park it in a way, and secretly probably fancy like my sister's mates or some of them. You
Does she
know,
know this?
no, she
Oh,
might now after you watch this. Probably, I think they, yeah, you know, it's yeah, it's just a funny little time when you're a teenager, isn't
for
it? You
sure.
know, think you know it all, but you really don't know it all. And you know, I was also just about trying to earn money. Like, luckily, even though, you know, it probably was child labor, but in many ways, working in the pub as a younger kid, you know, 12, well, not 12, but 13, 14, I was able to earn my own money. So for me, that's all I cared about. Like, I'll do some shifts, earn some money, I can go out and have fun and just party, and that's all I really cared about. Um, I knew that funny enough, I always knew I wanted I would be a singer. This is quite interesting. I knew I would become a singer, um, because even though I wasn't confident enough at that time to actually sing in public, like literally my dad would have to pay me and bribe me to sing a bit like on the karaoke in the pub. But even though I knew that, I had this kind of inner sense that I knew I could make money as a singer, and you know, because we had professional singers in the pub coming in regularly, and I just kind of knew that that's probably something that I would end up doing, which I did. So yeah, that was career wise at that stage. That's kind of where my head was at, really.
But so what did happen?
So, you know, I did end up becoming like a professional singer, whether that was singing in kind of nightclubs. I started singing a lot on the queer scene, in the gay bars, and I actually really loved it. Like, I went through stages where I was trying to become like a pop star, and I
Yep.
had my demo, and I would meet with record companies and send things out, and you know, and that was really exciting. And then I just, again, I got to like my kind of late teens, and kind of discovered myself a bit more in terms of, I finally came out when I was kind of like 18, 19. And then I had this kind of rebirth of myself, you know, and then, yeah, this was this kind of beginning to becoming an out kind of lesbian. But with that had some confidence, but then also with the singing side of things, I had my two gay boyfriends who were like my besties, and they was helping me get into the gay clubs. And I loved it because they put your poster up around the clubs. You feel like bloody Kylie or Madonna. Do you know what I mean? Like performing on, and you'd be on this big stage. And it was back in the 90s, like the queer scene was amazing, really, because it was
So
like,
good.
it was, and there were so many great clubs, and I used to do lesbian nights, and oh my god, it was like, it was great. But I also, again, ended up going traveling and backpacking with my sister as well. So I got to kind of travel around like Thailand and Australia and South Africa, and that was a massive big life learning curve for me in many ways as well. So yeah, there was lots of those kind of early teens to early 20s. There's where lots of big changes that I feel helped, you know, make me part of who I am today.
I love all of this. Can I ask when Saski was born? Because I mean, you just said about kind of seeing all these posters with Madonna and Kylie, and I can just imagine a poster in the bars back then, because it was so different. And you're right, the late for me, the late 90s, slash early noughties were amazing. The
Yeah,
best.
yeah,
The so much better.
it really was. It really was. So Saskia kind of came out of the idea of that at the time of me kind of deciding to start trying to push my singing career, which was typically around like the queer bars. I originally was down as kind of Joe. And then my manager at the time said to me, you know what, there's too many Joes on the scene. Like there'd be like Joe this, Joe that, Joe that. So you can't really be another Joe in there, because we all tend to do up and down the country, same sort of circuit. So it would be, you know, too many Joes. And literally that was what it was. And then so it was like, okay, let's put like loads of different names in a pot. And I remember just literally sharing it out, a massive big email to loads of people. I I actually felt like I'd made up that name Saski, right? But it was originally it started out as Saski Pearl, which thank God I didn't stick with that, because that just really does make me sound like a drag queen. And nothing on drag queens, of course I love them, but I am not a drag queen, so I'm a performer. So we dropped the Pearl, kept the Saski, because that was the most popular comeback of everyone's, like, you know, what everyone kind of liked. So yeah, I just kind of stuck with that, and it grew. It kind of stayed from there, really.
Does anyone still call you Joe?
Some people, I mean, it's funny, I'm not a diva about it if people call me Joe or Saskia, but I think in certain circles, particularly how you know me,
Yeah.
you know, and in my professional world, around the, you know, the inclusion staff presenting, it is very much Saskia. And that again is just because as my career kind of developed and evolved over the years, like a lot of people know me as Saskia was very much about me as a singer, and then me as like a pride host, and that entertainment side. But then where I moved into kind of the inclusion side of things, because of the circles and the people that kind of, I don't know, it like interlinked with that, or intersected, should we say? Saskia just became an addition, you know, a continued kind of name. And I feel a bit like it's funny because even now it's like, you know, if people call me Sassy, that's just regular for me. It's not like I don't feel like I'm different, whether you know me as Sassy or Joe. You just see me in a different capacity typically. Like, obviously, if I'm on stage, I'm going to be much more energetic, much louder than I would be if I'm sitting maybe on a Zoom call, or if I'm delivering a training session, although I can be still quite animated and loud in my training sessions. But, you know, it's just different persona, but I don't feel different as whether you know me as Joe or Sasky.
Yeah.
That's just the name. That's just the name. Do you know what
It's
I mean?
not a Beyonce
I,
or Sasha Fierce
yeah,
situation kind of
yeah.
thing.
I'm still Joe from the block. So, do you
I'm
know what I
writing that down because I love it. I love it.
mean?
Um,
Still me.
and for me, I mean, I'm Neil. And I my worlds do intersect as well. Like you've
Mm,
got DEI Neil, you've got kind of the House of Happiness, you know, running a
yeah,
sober clubbing event, and they do merge. And actually, a lot of people talk about kind of like separating their passion projects from their day-to-day life and stuff. But actually, who I am, my queerness, my energy kind of flows so fluidly through all of them that I don't really want to separate them.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't think you should. I don't think we should. I think we should. I'm very much, maybe this is the life coach in me coming out as well, but I'm very big on do what you love, because we spend so much time getting caught up in day to day in the stresses and strains, and particularly when people are thinking about how they can, change careers or grow careers, and there's a lot of fear around that. So I think do what you love. And yes, even for myself, of course, I mentioned earlier, sometimes I probably can feel a bit like I might have diluted my
Mm.
skills and my talents and what I'm doing. But then the other part of me is like, yeah, but if I stop doing it, then I'll feel like I've lost out, because I just love doing lots of different things.
Yeah.
And I've worked hard actually to be able to be at this stage, and I'm still nowhere near where I want to be. Like there's
Yeah.
loads of things I want to do, but I've worked hard to get to this point in my life where actually a lot of the work that I'm doing I absolutely really love, and I enjoy it, and I'm getting paid for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think own it.
Own it.
Own
Own,
it.
and it's a brand. It's almost a brand,
It is
right?
a brand.
You get a
Yeah.
personal brand. Yeah. What was the moment that you first found your voice or destination in inclusion then?
I think growing up, I was very lucky. Just like when I came out, I was, as many people do, I had the real fear, like, will I be accepted? Will I be supported? By my family and friends. And I was very lucky that my parents were supportive. And growing up with friends, other sort of queer friends, what I quickly realised is how they weren't supported, and
Mm.
I could see how unjustified that was and how sad it was. And I felt like, man, that's so unfair. So I kind of had that kind of, in my head. And again, a bit like what I was talking about earlier with my son and his friends, my parents were kind of that safe space. My house was the safe space, really, where friends could come and just chill and be themselves. And it was,
Yeah.
it was fine. I mean, don't get me wrong. I know my parents were, like my mum said, when I came out, my dad was quite supportive, and my dad's an ex-professional boxer, sailor, a publican geezer. Do you know what I mean? Like, but he was very supportive. But my mum told me, like, years later, that apparently he cried straight for 2 weeks. Like he was so worried about me,
Mm.
not that I was gay, but more worried about what other people would think. So I
Yeah.
didn't kind of know that. So anyway, that the backstory to that is that because I was lucky enough to have that support growing up, for me, my kind of sexuality wasn't as much, once I'd come out, it wasn't as much as an issue. I had the ability to be able to grow up and just focus on other things in my world, which was very fortunate. But then in terms of how I got into this kind of work and this field was, off the back of, what was happening with my friends and just seeing the injustice to a lot of other queer people, I volunteered for a schools inclusion charity, and I worked with them as a volunteer, and then I started to become an LGBT inclusion or LGBT plus inclusion like trainer. So I'd go into the schools then, and I'd be talking to kids, and I'd be talking to teachers about how they can overcome homophobia, biphobia, transphobia. And then I became kind of a manager of a project for that charity where we were setting up, I was working with those young kind of queer kids in the schools to set up like equality groups and allyship groups. And it was so amazing just to see how, once they felt they had their voice and a safe space, how empowered they became and how confident they became. And, it would be great because they'd be like setting up I'd support them set up like equality groups. We'd give them a task, a list of kind of tasks as campaigners, what they could do to change in the school. And we basically, you'd go back 6 weeks later, and you would just see a massive change in these kids. Like, even if they were the kids that were being bullied because they were gay, trans, or non-binary, whatever, wherever they were, it was like they were so much more confident, and some of them had come out, and some of them had been challenging the school uniform policy, and some of them had just actually challenged those bullies a bit more because they knew their voice. They knew, that they weren't alone. And I think for me that was so kind of, amazing for me to see. And I just thought, God, got to keep doing this because it works. It's important.
I love how we, just taking it back to Little Saski and that just kind of like being friends with everyone and just kind of like, wanting, not really caring who people were, whether they were considered the popular crowd or not. I don't know about you, but I look back at the popular crowd now and I think I'd rather be me now any day.
Yeah. Oh
Um,
yeah.
but how that kind of comes through in your work and how you are when you're out, whether it's hosting a Pride gig or in your DEI work, how that shines through.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I've never really thought about it like that, really, I guess. But I am always very much of the view of, take people as you find them. And
Mm.
if someone's an arsehole, they're an arsehole. It isn't because of
Yeah.
their sexuality or their religion or, I mean, sometimes, of course, things might play into it, but ultimately we're all, we're all human, we're people. So we have to start somewhere, don't
Yeah.
we? And
Do you think pub life has a bit to do with that as well, actually? Because
yeah,
I was brought up in not all, it wasn't always fun, but like community centres, British Legion type things,
yeah.
and then really kind of like my early 20s worked in a pub, and so was surrounded by all these different kind of people, and it's
Mm,
reflected in my friendship groups now. I've got friends that are, Gen Z through to friends that are 80 plus.
yeah.
Like, and do you think pub life has a bit to do with that openness and acceptance of people?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm really grateful for that. I
Mm,
think also growing up though as well, you kind of get a bit more of a sense for people.
mm.
The goodies and the baddies,
Yeah.
you get a bit more. I mean, you never really know someone until, you know, things happen. But
Yeah.
definitely from that social perspective and that confidence and understanding a bit more about people, I feel like it's given me a lot more kind of social awareness, emotional intelligence. I think that's played
Yes.
into a lot. I mean, so maybe some people might disagree with that, but I feel like you definitely get. I'm very good with people,
Yeah.
and I love, a bit like yourself. I love having the chat with people. I love finding out
Yeah.
about them, and I'm very much, and I want to know, what's going on in your world, and also if I feel like there's a way I can help them. I'm probably quite an empath in that respect. If I feel like there's a way I can help them in whichever capacity that can be, then of course I'm very quick to do that. Or I just love to see people, to probably in some ways to my detriment, because I've put so much time and energy into some others and sometimes forget myself. Like,
Yeah.
do you know what I
Same.
mean? But
Same.
but it's one of those things. It does, without sounding really fluffy, but that makes me feel good. It makes me feel good to know if I can help somebody, particularly if I know they've struggled. And I feel like I'll take that from my own privilege,
Yeah.
because my privilege has been that I have been very fortunate in my life so far and growing up. Yes, I've had there's been lots of really tough times and there's been lots of things that have happened, but I've got through them, and I feel like I've got through them as a result also of the support and the love and
Yeah.
the family that I've had and the friends I had. So it's not that I'm sitting here like some martyr going, and I've got to give it all back, but I just think it's part of my DNA to feel
Yeah.
like, well, what can we do? How can we work on this to support you? Um, you know.
I love that. Nothing wrong with being a bit fluffy.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about someone who has shaped you the most along the way?
Um, I feel like I've had lots of, because again, probably in terms of doing, you know, lots of different things. My sister's had a big influence on who I am, and she probably wouldn't. If she heard me say that, she'd probably be quite surprised, because sometimes I love her, but we can kill each other.
What's your sister's name?
My sister's Kelly. And she's great, and I do really love her. But I think growing up, I did learn a lot from her. She looked after me, and my parents were there as well. But my parents were running businesses and
Mm.
working all the hours, and so my sister kind of was there for me a lot. So I feel like she shaped me, particularly around that kind of social side and the confidence, and stuff like that. And I think, not to name names, but there has also, obviously, when we talk about what shapes you, there's obviously always got to be some negative experiences that you
Mm.
have, that I feel like I've learned a lot about myself from, whether that's been stuff that's been a bit more traumatic, or even just maybe whether it's relationships or
Yeah.
friendships, that you feel like, actually, I've realized that was probably quite toxic. And from that, I've learned, and through therapy, I've learned that, recognize the red flags, and, don't allow people, too much, if they're not treating you with respect, So
Yeah.
yeah, lots of different things that have shaped me to who I am now. But I think we're always learning, aren't we?
Oh,
You know
I
what I
mean, it
mean?
doesn't stop, does it? But it's so you know what, you've raised such a good point, because actually when I ask that question, it's so often the positive influences, the positive lessons and relationships, but actually we are shaped by the trauma. We are
Mm,
shaped by the not, I think our romantic relationships from the beginning have an
yeah.
impact on, they shape the rest of our future of relationships, don't they? Unless you can
Yeah.
nip it in the bud sometimes. So we are shaped on those. So
Mm.
thanks for raising that, because it's a really important point when we think about how we learn and grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you to all the arseholes out there who made me who I am today.
Thank you and
uh,
fuck you.
yeah, that's it. That's what I always say. Thank you for fucking up. You
I
made
say
me.
it to myself as well, to be fair. My final question for this segment, Saski, is looking back, what are you most proud of to date?
I think well, obviously, my son. I'm proud of of becoming a parent, and because actually, I always knew I wanted to be a parent, a mum. But at the time of us, I was only in my early, like, kind of mid 20s, really, when my partner at the time really was wanting to have a baby. And of course, being lesbians, we had to go through IVF, so we had to obviously pay for that and fund that. And I really worked my bloody ass off for it, because it was expensive fun. So I guess I'm happy and pleased and proud that I persevered and became a parent. But you know what? I've done a lot of just based on what we've just previously mentioned about maybe traumas and how things shape you. I have done a lot of work on myself, and that's always going to be ongoing. And I feel like, I'm proud that I've stuck with that. I've stuck with myself and I haven't given up on myself. And I'm very much about, positivity, the law of attraction, and not toxic positivity, but just
Mm,
understanding that sometimes we don't have control over what we do or what the future holds or circumstances. But I always try to learn and find how can I get through it, because it's not about, it's about, do you go through it or grow through it. And I think for
yes.
me, I really do try to, even though I'm not saying that's easy, but sometimes I feel I'm proud that I've worked on myself and who I am to try and develop my personal skills and shape who I am today. And that continues.
The House of Happiness is London's ultimate sober clubbing extravaganza. We're led and delivered but created for all, whether teetotal, sober curious, or just taking a booze snooze. We love a day rave, and on a Saturday afternoon you can expect banging house tunes, DJs on decks, dancers on podiums, and a fully stocked alcohol-free bar. Flamboyant, bold, with a glitter station to boot. We're all about safe, inclusive fun, and we even have a pre-meet so that you can make new sober buddies before you hit the dance floor. Grab your tickets from Instagram now at House of Happiness Official, and we'll see you on the dance floor.
Oh no,
Are
thank
you
you.
ready for some quick fire questions?
Go on, do it, do it, do it.
What album, book, or movie has had a lasting impact on you?
Okay, I mean, look, do you know what? I'm not the biggest reader, but it's not because I love the idea of books, but I think, again, this may be an ADHD thing. I can't focus on reading, so I'm big on Audible, right? So I always listen. I love listening to the stories. I love listening to things, and what I always pick up on and listen to is actually The Power by Rhonda Byrne, and I always listen to that. And because if I'm feeling like a bit like what I've just said here, if I feel like my feeling frequencies are a bit low, I'm a bit off
Mm,
key, I just need a little top up. So
yeah.
very often, almost not joking, on a weekly basis, like if I'm in my car driving, I'll put on, I'll be, oh, what chapter is it that I'm feeling like I need to top up on?
Okay.
And so that's something that I definitely listen to a lot. And also I'm very big on motivational speaking and coaches. And so I listen a lot to kind of like Mel Robbins. I love Oprah. I love those type of people who are kind of just real.
Yeah.
They're very successful in their life, but they're also real about, they're not just playing on the fact that they're rich and famous. They say when things are shit, they're shit. And
Yeah.
then, so I love that. So yeah, they're probably the sort of things that I listen to a lot.
Yeah, I never used to, but actually, a few years ago, I overcome my hate of I didn't really used to like podcasts at all, and I actually discovered a massive love of Brené Brown, and
Yes.
actually massively changed my life. I know she's quite problematic in some areas, but massively changed my life in terms of doing the work
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
not seeing it as woo woo or not for me.
Yeah, yeah. And I think with that type of stuff, it's a bit like religions in many ways for me. Like that kind of self-awareness, and that is that
Mm,
spiritual side of me. That is my religion, but also I'll just take the bits that
yeah,
work for me. That's
absolutely.
what I think's good.
Lovely. Love that as a takeaway. What's a saying you live by and one that you'd put in the bin?
I think often it's, for me, and I had to tell myself this literally this week, the storm hasn't come to stay, it's come to pass. Because I feel like no matter what's happening, what you're going through, um, the physical things might not change, but even your emotional side on your feeling about something, somewhere along there's going to have to be a shift at some point.
Yep.
So that's something that I try and remember, and it worked well for me this week when I needed to tell myself that, and it did. The storm did pass a bit more, and then I think the one that I've probably been is when people say it is what it is, because I don't know.
It's mine too.
It comes up. And to be fair, you probably don't get me wrong. You may well hear me say this at some point in the future. But what I feel with that, sometimes, yeah, it is relevant. But other times when people say it, they kind of use it as a get out of jail free card. So they can just be like, well, I don't have to deal with this. And I think even coming back to being like my work around allyship, if someone says, well, it doesn't affect me because that's just the way it is. Well, actually, no, you can do something to make a change. So it isn't how it is.
It reeks of complacency. It genuinely is about the seventh time it's been said as one that people put in the bin. So yeah, that's it, right in the bin. What's been the best adventure of your life so far?
Oh, I think like I love my EDI work. It's like I say, because of what I do with this. That I've been backpacking. I'm a parent. They're quite big things in my world. But I think the opportunities and the experiences that I've had as being maybe Saski, if you like, in my Saski world, is that I have been able to do great events, meet loads of amazing people, learn new things about myself, share and support others, and see a change. And so I'm grateful really for the Saski journey, if you like, which continues.
Well, hey,
So yeah, all the things that brings.
the Saski journey. That sounds like an album in the making. What three words would you use to describe you and your origin story?
Oh God, what three words would I use? Oh God, I have to think about this. I think tenacious or tenacity. I think empathy, and I think fun as well, because like I said, sometimes you're going to go through shit, but if you stick with things and you just try and stay strong in whichever way you can do that, you're going to get through it. And actually, when you've experienced traumas and or discrimination or whatever, that does give you that level of empathy, or it should, hopefully, because you're understanding that can happen to anybody. But also, life has to be fun where you can make it fun. So I guess they're my three.
Love it. Tenacity, empathy, and fun.
Yeah.
Let's fast forward a little bit. What exciting things do you have coming up?
Well, I think a bit like what I mentioned earlier, I'm looking forward to launching my kind of my online course. Also, just continuing with my Everyday Pride inclusion training, but really again honing in more on that kind of entertainment side of who I am. So just yesterday, I probably shouldn't say it because it may not come off, but just yesterday I had a conversation with my friend who's recording a kind of a single and an album now for a lot of the bigger kind of names. It's around Pride. And he's asked me if I'll lay some vocals or do a chorus and that. So that's hopefully going to happen a bit later in the year. And again, who knows? But the online course definitely. And I just want to push the presenting side more, and the podcast, of course, as well. So yeah, just watch this space, really.
Where can people watch this space? Like when can people expect a podcast? Where can people follow you?
I think, well, you can continue on my social media. So that's
Yep.
at Saski Singer for Instagram, and also Facebook. I'm not on what we call X. In fact, I would say very much make them your X.
Absolutely.
So I'm not on them anymore. But I've also got my website, which is saski.co.uk. And with interviews and stuff, my YouTube channel, all the links are on my website as
Brilliant.
well.
Go check them out, people. What brings you joy today?
I think what, there's nothing that I love more than just having that time out with my son. I really love the work I do. I feel so grateful and blessed, and I love, I love all of that. But actually, my happy space is when I've just, with my son, when I'm having that time with just me and him, because I just feel I feel quite wholesome when I'm with him, and it's really what I actually need, particularly when everything's always a bit crazy. It's the time where I just literally switch off and it's just me and my boy, even though we might do things with family or friends, but it's me and my boy time. That's what's really important to me and my happy
That's
place.
that's beautiful. What takeaways do you have for anyone listening wanting to carve out a career in inclusion?
I think be woke as fuck and
Yes,
be proud.
yes. I've got a mug that says woke AF actually. So
Yeah.
yeah, all about it.
I think be woke, but I also think, you know what, it's a tough time at the minute, isn't it? About
Mm.
for Edie and I, and where people kind of sit on that, and a lot of that plays into obviously, unfortunately, social media. I think about how you can kind of I think be woke, but also when we think about what Desmond Tutu talks about, where he's like, don't raise your argument, don't raise your voice, raise your argument, or words to that effect. And I think what's kind of important in this sphere right now is that yes, we're all entitled to our opinions, and yes, it is actually quite enraging, a lot of stuff that's happening, particularly for our community. But I actually think we do also need to kind of learn and bring it back to how we can maybe mediate that a bit
Mm.
better. Because with social media, everyone's like slagging everyone off and hating everyone on both sides. And I can understand how it's happened. But what also has happened is it's meant that a lot of people potentially that could be our allies have withdrawn because they're scared of saying the wrong thing
Yeah.
or offending people, or they are, unable to, they feel like they don't want to be seen to take sides. And that's been a bit of a detriment to our community again. So I think if you are looking to get into that sphere, yes, be open and be out there and understand what the issues are and that they are changing, but also work on how you can have a more of a better conversation to bring allies into our world.
Love that. Final question for you. Do you have any words of encouragement or wisdom for anyone out there to help them get to wherever they're going?
You know what? I think just always kind of just keep going in whatever it is you're trying to do. For starter, try not to surround yourself with negative people, like toxic people, because unfortunately, well, not in every way, but depending on what route you're going into, there'll often be those people, and sometimes you might feel you have to kind of stay with them because they can get you to where you want to go. And I think if you can kind of remember that, if you can take stock and be true to yourself, and again, being your true authentic self plays into that, then actually you're probably going to be you're going to move forward a lot quicker than what you would if you kind of hung around the wrong people. And I also just think, when we have these ideas about where we want to go and what we want to do, the end goal, it's not always, we don't always get there because following the route we think we should take. So know that that's okay, and know that it's all right to stop, and it's okay to kind of think and reevaluate whether this is still right for you, or actually I need to go down another road. And keep your lines of communication open, keep positive, and like I say, keep talking, keep researching and looking to what you want to do, and write down your bloody goals as well, so then you've got it there. Manifest it, write it down.
I needed to hear so much of that. I'm so glad we finally got to do this.
Oh, me
Thank
too.
you for always just being you and for inspiring me. And I can't wait to see you soon. Thank you so much.
Oh no, thank you so much, Lou. And listen, the feeling's mutual, and keep doing what you're doing because you're amazing as well. And I'm excited for the future. Um,
Right back at you. And
ah,
yes, I can't wait for your podcast. Bring it on.
yeah, definitely. Thank
Cheers,
you.
Saski.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed that conversation. It was everything I knew it would be and more. I'm so glad we finally got it in. I loved chatting about the 90s with Saski and kind of dissecting how the 90s is different through to today, particularly for young people, and kind of some of the ways it's harder for young people now, but also some of the things that we were lacking in terms of kind of like those careful conversations with parents and others around awareness. Saskia sharing that she was a bit of a tomboy with a love of those red jeans. And yeah, through to hearing about her journey, becoming a singer, wanting to be a pop star, and then finding herself in inclusion. Just such an amazing story. And the way that Saski's destination in equality, diversity, inclusion is shaped by the support that she had, but the lack of support that those people around her, her friends, um, and that's shaping who she is and how she shows up. It was brilliant to hear about her journey of parenting. We could have talked about that so much more. And yeah, about that pub life and how pub life has shaped her social awareness, her emotional intelligence, and being an empath. And that's something that really shines through in her. The three words that Saskia uses to describe her origin story: tenacity, empathy, and fun. I see all of those things up in abundance. I'm so excited to find out more and see more about Saski's new masterclass EDI training that's coming out when it comes to, continuing to make the world a more inclusive place for queer people. Some possibly laying some vocals on the track, get Saskia back on stage. And yeah, just amazing conversation. Saskia, thank you so much. I cannot wait to see you soon. Thank you so much for everyone who has tuned in and listened. Please like, subscribe, share with anyone you think might benefit from listening. And yeah, stay tuned for more amazing guests on Pause and Rewind. Thank you. Bye.